The movie begins with a guy named Danny who steps into the subway following a guy wearing a Jewish cap. In the train, he starts harassing the poor guy. He stomps on his shoes with his boots, but the guy doesn't react and simply exits at the next station. However, Danny isn't ready to let him go. He follows him outside and knocks the book out of the poor guy's hands. He even hits him hoping for some sort of response. But when the guy doesn't respond, he leaves. Later, he attends a fascist meeting at Lena Mobius's house. They were talking about how the government isn't doing anything. Lena has a daughter, Carla, who catches Danny's eye. Danny takes the floor and declares that Jews pose the greatest threat to society and that they need to be eradicated. He believes that they are like rats who should be stomped upon. His hatred is so intense that even the local fascists are shocked by the young neo-Nazis' rage. Other members think that they shouldn't do anything harsh as they don't want a repeat of Nazi Germany. However, Danny desires exactly that. After the meeting, Lena and another member, Curtis, meets Danny and asks if he has any ties to the FBI or police, and then inquires who Danny would want to kill first. Danny answers Elio Manzetti, a former ambassador to France and managing director of an investment banking firm. He already has planned how to do it. He wants to kill him midday with a gun having no silencer to make it a big event. Lena invites the neo-Nazi and his friends to a country house, but Curtis is unhappy as he has renounced anti-Semitism. Whereas, on the way back, Danny and his gang harasses some black men, and after a fight, they end up in jail. Carla personally arrives to bail Danny out. She took him to her place and told him about his father. Like many Nazis, her father hid in Argentina and is now in a mental hospital. They then engage in intimate relations. The next morning, she wakes Danny and asks him to leave as she doesn't want her mother to know he spent the night. As Danny leaves, Curtis notices him. Outside, he flaunts a swastika on his shirt, pushing past some black men as he walks. At his home, among his old belongings, he finds a school notebook. He remembers his childhood when he was at a scripture meeting, revealing that he himself is a Jew. He argued with his teacher, claiming that God is cruel and demands people fulfill all his whims. He believes that Abraham was ready to sacrifice his son Isaac, and even though it didn't happen, they were forever broken, as God thinks himself as great and others as insignificant beings. Already back then, Danny began doubting his Jewish identity. In the drawer, there is also Nazi literature and a gun. His sister, Linda, takes care of their sick father. Looking at Danny's shirt, she questions how he can even wear that, as he must know what it represents to their people. Danny denies Jews being his people. For his father's sake, Danny changes his shirt. He then eats with his father. In the evening, a journalist contacts Danny, writing about far-right groups. He wants Danny to share his ideas with him. The journalist's name was Guy Daniels. According to Danny's racist ideology, whites are at the top, blacks at the bottom, and Asians, Arabs, and Latinos somewhere in between. Judaism is seen as a disease. Jews supposedly undermine the traditional foundations of life, having no roots or attachments. Because of this, Jews can't plow fields or grow wheat, but they can buy and resell it. They are just intellectual labor. That is why they can please women, which is a sign of weakness. True men don't please women. Guy appreciates Danny's oratory skills, but there's one issue. Guy asks, how can Danny believe all this when he himself is Jew? The journalist already did some digging and knows that Danny had a bar mitzvah in March of 1888. Danny panics at this revelation and starts claiming it's all lies, that he's been slandered, and that he'll sue the newspaper if Guy publishes their conversation. He claims the rabbi lied to discredit him. To be more convincing, Danny places a gun on the table, but to ensure the article doesn't get published, he shoves the gun into Guy's mouth. He threatens him to not publish this information in his newspaper. The skinheads arrive at the fascists' country house, where a crowd of other aggressive, shaven-headed men are already hanging out. One of them, the biggest, suddenly attacks Danny. Danny quickly retaliates, first striking the aggressor in the throat and then smashing his face with his head. He beats up the guy. Other men were impressed by him and asked the skinheads to join them. The Nazis play a military board game, imagining themselves as Hitler. They shared that if ever necessary, they could easily make explosives for Danny. In the morning, they teach him to shoot a rifle, using a caricature of a Jewish and black family as the target. Danny's shooting skills are mediocre compared to the sniper Drake. Later, Danny goes to Lena's house. He finds an opportunity to talk to Carla. He wants to continue his relationship with Carla. She resists, but eventually invites him to climb through her window that night. Danny does just that, right when Carla is being intimate with the fascist Curtis. He leaves. The next day, Danny confesses to Curtis that he plans to carry out an attack with the whole gang. Later, the Nazis storm into a Jewish cafe and demand to be served non-kosher food. Danny taunts the waiter about why the Bible forbids having chicken with egg but not milk. He feels it's really stupid. They all begin taunting him. After listening to their taunts, the waiter calls the cook, who arms himself with a stick. The topic of religion quickly escalated into a brawl, and soon the neo-Nazis found themselves in court. The judge gave them a choice: 30 days in jail or sensitivity training by attending meetings with Holocaust survivors. The skinheads chose the latter. They attended the meeting and laughed it off until one elderly man began recounting how a German sergeant had bayoneted his son right in front of him during the war. His son was 3 years old, and the soldiers shot him in front of him. The soldiers laughed, and he could do nothing. Hearing this story, Danny became enraged. He thought that the man who stood by while his son was killed and did nothing to the sergeant. He believes what he did was worse than being a corpse. A woman asked Danny how he would have reacted, considering he had never experienced suffering, growing up in a comfortable, affluent country, and imagining himself a hero. She told him that, just like the survivors, he wouldn't have done anything either. Danny decided he had nothing to learn from these people and left the meeting. Later, his friends showed him some explosives. The skinheads broke into a synagogue and began wrecking it. Danny started planting a bomb under the pulpit, but felt uneasy when his friends grabbed a Torah scroll. He demanded they not touch it, but the Nazis instead began tearing and trampling on the Holy Scripture. His friends were surprised by his reaction, and Drake seemed to suspect something. After everyone left, Danny, holding back tears, picked up and rolled up the scroll. After some time, from the news, the skinheads learned that their bomb had been defused 13 minutes before it was supposed to explode. Danny couldn't get the old man's story out of his head and imagined himself as the sergeant killer. It turned out Danny had taken the scroll, repaired it, and carefully cleaned it. In the present, alone in a room, he wraps tefillin around his stomach, which Jews use during prayer, as he simultaneously performed a Nazi salute and read the Torah. After a few minutes, Drake suggested to Danny that they should kill a Jew. He took him to a building where Manzetti was speaking. They waited until evening. Danny took aim but missed. Drake was sure he did it on purpose and then noticed a tallit under Danny's shirt. They ensued in a struggle, and Danny shot him. After this incident, memories flooded back in Danny's mind. Even as a child, he disliked that Jews only endured and sacrificed themselves. Eventually, Danny ran away from the lesson. Danny then visits Lena and Curtis, who plan to promote their ideology to the masses, giving lectures even to black people and liberals, with Danny playing an important role in this. Danny was so nervous, he threw up, but Carla kissed him. They slept together, and while Danny was in the shower, Carly found the stolen scroll. Danny asked her to get dressed because one shouldn't be naked in front of the Holy Scripture. Carla discovered that Danny knew Hebrew, and she wanted to learn it too, supposedly to better understand her enemy. Danny agreed to teach her. Later, Danny began teaching anti-Semitism. One day, Danny noticed a Jewish family and followed them. He once again saw himself as the German sergeant. Danny entered a Jewish literature store and met his friend Shlomo, who was going to become a rabbi and marry their classmate Miriam that summer. Danny was invited to celebrate the Jewish New Year. Next day, Danny meets up with his friends. Their bomb test was successful. Meanwhile, Carla tried to understand Judaism and concluded that this religion was strange. She also noted that Danny talked so much about Jews, it seemed he was one himself. Danny defended himself by saying that Hitler also constantly talked about Jews. Danny went to celebrate the Jewish New Year with their classmates who he met at the literature store. There he met another classmate, Avi, in the synagogue. Avi immediately called him an anti-Semite and a fascist. He had proof that Danny was a Jewish Nazi. Their argument almost turned into a fight. On the street, Miriam unexpectedly asked Danny about Lena Mobius. It turned out that Miriam worked in the prosecutor's office and that half of the members of the fascist cell were informers. At the next meeting, many right-wing financiers showed up. It seemed Danny was already disillusioned with the organization, so he began his speech with a Jewish prayer. He continued by saying that Jews should be loved because it would make things worse for them, as hatred only strengthened them. The only way to annihilate those cunning people once and for all was to embrace them. Hearing this, Lena was filled with rage. Afterwards, she told Danny that she no longer wanted Danny to work with them. At that moment, they saw on TV a news report that showed that Manzetti had been killed. Lena and Curtis thought it was Danny's doing, but Danny believed he was framed by Drake. Danny stormed outside and saw Guy. He punches him as he comes closer to him. Later, Miriam warned Danny that she had told the cops, revealing that he was the one who suggested killing Manzetti at the meeting. She asked if he really wanted to kill Jews, if he wanted to kill her. She didn't want his friend to be arrested, so she suggests sticking to the story that Danny had infiltrated the cell on purpose to expose the fascists. She gave him a recorder and asked him to record Lena Mobius, asking him to commit some act of violence. Miriam wanted to save her friend, whereas Carla had become seriously interested in Judaism and proposed celebrating Yom Kippur together at the synagogue the next day. The newspaper called Danny a Jewish Nazi and accused him of Manzetti's murder. Lena gave an interview about it, and Danny's father learned horrible things about his son from the TV. The upcoming day, Danny arrived at the synagogue and, to his surprise, found Carla there along with his friends. He begged her to leave, but she asked him not to distract her from the prayer. Miriam's fiancé was supposed to lead the prayer, but Danny volunteered to replace him. As he read the prayer, he had a change of heart. He once again imagined himself as a Nazi sergeant, but this time he was also the Jew who didn't stand still and attacked the enemy. He stepped out of the prayer, and with only 5 minutes left until the explosion, he approached his friends and confessed that he had planted the bomb. They needed to get everyone outside as quickly as possible. People panicked and evacuated the building, with Carla being the last to leave. However, Danny decided to stay. A bright flash enveloped him, and he found himself back at school, climbing the stairs. He is stuck in a loop where on each floor, his childhood teacher talks about the same discussion they had when Danny was a child. The movie ends here. Thanks for watching the video. Please like it and subscribe the Explanation Pro channel for more contents like this.